It's a privilege. It's for posterity. And it's all coming in the middle of a pandemic. Voting in El Paso County, from the local runoff to the presidential election this November. We discuss some very important topics, including your safety, with Lisa Wise, the elections administrator for El Paso County. I'm Duke Keith, and this is El Paso Townsquare. We welcome Lisa Wise, the elections administrator for the County of El Paso, to El Paso Townsquare. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a very busy time for you, and we appreciate that time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it is definitely busy, the last day of early voting, but I'm happy to discuss elections anytime I get the chance.
And I know that in El Paso County in particular, but I know across the country, there are folks who are wondering about their vote, how they will be counted. I imagine, especially in a presidential election year, that kind of increases turnout. I know that this is more for runoff and local election stuff, but this will apply in November as much as it does now. Just talk about, I guess, probably the first and most important question for people is, how safe will I be if I go vote?
Sure. So, this pandemic has obviously changed how the community is doing a lot of activities. Voting just happens to be one of them. And back in March, when everything started to kind of come out information-wise, and the orders started to happen on shutting down and altering how we behave and stay safe and shelter in place, we began to really look at, okay, what are we going to do for the runoff? At that point, the runoff was in May. We thought we had a much tighter window. We weren't sure exactly what we'd be able to get done at that point.
Yeah.
Within a couple weeks, the governor had moved that date for the runoff to July, which gave us much more time to order things like the PPE, which at that point everyone in the country was ordering PPE, personal protective equipment, and the medical facilities and any sort of anything that dealt with the medical side of it was getting priority. So we kind of, even as elections, had to take a step back and realize that we weren't going to be able to get maybe everything we needed right away. So
Sure.
There was a lot of work at the county level between our department, between the budget, between the purchasing. I mean, there was just kind of we all had to kind of come together and figure out how can we get everything we need, knowing that on the totem pole we were not at the top, not at the bottom, but not at the top. So that took a lot of kind of piecemealing things together, and it ended up working out okay. We were able to get everything we needed. But what we have done at the polling sites is, and we've had over 15,000 in-person voters since early voting started, and we've been getting positive feedback about everything we've been doing. Basically, it starts with making sure that we are keeping the machines 6 feet apart, trying to keep that social distancing going. Also in the lines and things like that, we've got those marked very similar to banks, stores, things you've seen there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also asking our voters to please mask up. We're asking our voters to mask up. We're asking them to not greet people with hugs or handshakes, even though I know people are missing other people. But if you're not in the same household, to still maintain that 6 foot social distancing. Our poll workers are masked. They've also got masks on site if someone does forget one. They have air disinfectant that they're using throughout the day. They've got disposable styluses. They've got germicidal cleaner. We're taking any precaution we can as far as any touch point a voter has. We follow behind them once they're gone and disinfect anything they touched. We've really just taken every precaution we can. We've taken what the orders were from the direction we got from Secretary of State, and added on to that whatever we thought we could do to make sure that voters feel safe when they come to the polling sites.
What are some of the
our poll workers?
Sure, absolutely, and right. You want to keep the folks who are volunteering their time for you safe as well. What are some of the personal touches you guys have kind of added to what you've gotten in terms of direction from the state of Texas?
So, I mean, the state of Texas has given us direction on the things like the mask mandate order came out last week, but that does not pertain to the voters. The election voters and are actually exempt on that and in that order. But we have made sure that we provide the sites with whatever they would need. Some of the counties and other states weren't able to get hand sanitizer and all of those things, but we were lucky, so we made sure we have hand sanitizer at every location, not just for our poll workers, but also for our voters. And again, we also have masks. We are providing masks if they need masks. We have the disposable styluses, which are basically Q-tips, but that's an added step. We disinfect the machine, even though most voters haven't touched it because they're using that stylus. The air disinfectant was something that we had seen another county use. And so we decided to get that and periodically use that. In November, we'll also have the finger cots, the little things that you can put on your finger in case you don't want to use the stylus and you just still want to use your finger, but have it, making sure that you haven't touched anything that someone else touched. So, I mean, we're still, everything we're doing now is kind of, we're looking at, okay, what could we do different? How could we do better? What worked? What didn't work? Because what works for a 6% turnout may not work for a 60% turnout, which would be close to what we have in November. So we're just it's very fluid. We're constantly changing and updating and improving and hoping that we get more direction. Obviously, once this election's over, we're also hoping that the numbers decline rather than continue to spike, as that obviously I think that does keep some voters home, and it does also make our poll workers a little uneasy. I mean, we're lucky in that we have poll workers who have volunteered to come out and work, and we haven't had to shutter many polling sites as a lot of other counties and states have. I mean, there's some big municipalities that have had to go down into the single digits, and that's been quite an issue for other states. We have not had that happen here, so we've been lucky on that side of it.
Yeah, I think people will hear probably around the country different polling places in different states, and there's like one site for an area that serves 100,000 people or something.
Yeah,
and it's as ridiculous as it sounds. It has a lot to do with I'm sure the folks who are willing to come out and man those polling stations for you.
Right. It has a lot to do with the poll workers, especially when I think the average poll worker across the country is 70 plus, and everyone knows that is in the at-risk category, and so asking telling people at the same time shelter in place, stay home, and then asking them to come out and deal with the public when they're in that at-risk category is pretty tough to do. It's pretty tough to get them. There's also the issue of, besides the poll workers, the actual locations. There's a lot of locations that in the past may have welcomed us to host our election in their location, who now are saying no. I mean, we just paid $4,000 to be disinfected, and we're not going to have the voters come through, the public come through, and have to do that again. Or we're not open to the public, and we don't want to deal with how we would do that now. And so there's a lot of that also. I mean, those sites, especially during early voting, we were really lucky because they have to host us for 2 weeks, and normally we would have 31 sites, and we only lost one site this early voting session, which was because that 31st site was a assisted living facility, and obviously we're not going to be using that during these elections. But we do use a lot of assisted living facilities even on election day. So we did have to consolidate. I think we went down about 8 or 10 sites because we did have 5 or 6 that were assisted living facilities, and then we had a couple other locations that just did not feel comfortable hosting us this time, and so those are new things we have to deal with. That's what some of the stuff that if the numbers continue to increase will definitely affect what we're able to provide in November. So I'm hoping that they don't, and they drop down, and so we have more entities and building managers and places who say, yeah, we're welcome back, and we're happy to have you back here again, instead of being afraid of hosting us.
Sure. And if I heard the number properly, you said so far through early voting for this runoff election, you've seen 15,000 people come. which
in person,
in
yeah, and
person.
we've got more than that. We've got, I think, I don't know the exact number of ballot by mail because it changes every day, but we've seen over 15,000 in person, and that's a pretty high number. This, even during a pandemic, this will be probably the highest turnout on a runoff that we've seen since 2008. So it'll surpass 12 and 16. And to do that in a pandemic is I think, a pretty powerful statement that, El Paso residents, they do want to vote. They will come out and vote, and we're happy to see that.
I would imagine, I know that obviously the presidential election, that whole cycle really drives a lot of what you see from your position. And as you get ready for November, what are some of the specific steps you guys are going to need to take, not in terms of safety, but just in handling the crowds? Because I would imagine there are going to be a few folks ready to go vote.
So one of the things that we're going to do, actually, that we are doing in the process of doing right now, is applying for the Vote Center program. And in the state of Texas, counties can apply to the Texas Secretary of State to participate under the Vote Center model on Election Day or countywide polling place. And what that does is basically it mimics early voting. So on early voting, where you can go to any location, you've got 30 choices, 40 choices, depending on the election and how many we can get. On Election Day, you're down to one. You've got your precinct, and we're applying so that in November we can extend that to Election Day, giving voters anywhere between 100 and 150, 100 to 160 choices on Election Day. And we're hoping that having that will also help with maintaining the social distancing because of the pandemic, but also a better line management. Of having places where, hey, if there's an hour-long line at my elementary school, I can go to the elementary school 3 blocks away where there's a 5-minute line, and really try and manage things with that just by the availability of new places. We're also anticipating that we'll have huge numbers of ballot by mail, as we did this time compared in the past. And so we do have a vendor who has a great reputation of turning those around really quickly, because the manpower to do something like 50 to 100,000 ballot by mail out of our office is pretty difficult. But we have worked with the county to secure locations so that we can do some in-house, a portion of that in-house. But so there's a lot of things that are changing going into November that voters need to be aware of, that we're doing. I mean, we're doing the vote centers, and we're going to really push making sure that the ballot by mail is utilized by anyone that does qualify. But there's also there's also the removal of the straight ticket. This will be the first election. The law was passed, but it doesn't go into effect till this year, where in November you will not be able to just go in and pick a party and pre-fill your partisan races. You'll have to go down the ballot race by race, and it's going to be a very long ballot. So that's something else to keep in mind when we talk about the lines. We have probably about 13 entities besides the partisan races that are going to be on that ballot. Yeah, between municipalities and schools and water districts, and so you probably won't have all 13 on your ballot, but you might have a school district in the city of El Paso, and you might have then your water or something like that. I mean, there's definitely going to be some overlap. So whatever we can do, and that's kind of what we're going to start this summer once we get through this election, is really come back around Labor Day and start to do an advertising campaign, a push on informing about vote centers, informing about the ballot by mail for at least for voters 65 and over. We will be sending every registered voter who's 65 and over an application for ballot by mail, so that they know that they can fill that out, they have it in hand. And then obviously we'll discuss the straight ticket removal. So that's all outside of the pandemic. So there's still a lot going on that then is mixed with this kind of the unknown, which is really the hardest part, which is we don't know what that pandemic climate will look like here in another 5 months.
Yeah, true. And I know as you get done with early voting, and this is just for the runoff, and obviously Election Day is next Tuesday, correct?
Next Tuesday, July 14th, 7 to 7. Yep.
Okay. And that is the actual voting day for the county runoff elections, or all the runoff elections in El Paso. And then and then obviously on to the big show, so to speak.
Yeah,
for
then
November.
it's not a lot of turnaround time. We kind of, clean up our list, do all of our canvassing and wrap up from that. And then we begin our preparation already for November.
And let me ask about, I know voting by mail has been such a contentious issue around. What are the guidelines for the state of Texas for people who want to know whether or not they qualify to vote by mail?
So yeah, that's gone, it's been back and forth through the courts, in the last couple of months. And so in order to qualify to vote by mail, you need to be 65 years of age or older. You need to be sick or disabled, and I'll talk about that one in a second.
Sure.
Out of the county on election day, or somewhere like a jail facility, but not have lost your voting rights.
Yeah.
So basically, you could be sitting in a county jail, but not finally convicted of a felony or anything that would take those that right away. So the sick and disabled issue is what's really been in the news lately, which is that there were some lawsuits stating that we think not having immunity to corona is a disability, or fear of COVID-19 is a disability. The courts have said, and they have ruled that they do not agree that the fear of COVID-19 or no immune system is not a disability on its own, not a disability.
Right.
Now, as far as our department is concerned, when we receive an application, and this is the other thing that the Texas Supreme Court stated, is that our responsibility does not really extend outside the four corners of that application, which is that we've processed the applications the same way we always have. If you mark that you're 65 or older, we verify that your birth date. We obviously verify that on the form. If you are going to be out of the county on election day, one of the stipulations is on your application you have to provide an address outside the county where we'll send your ballot, so that you're not just marking that. When it comes to the disability marking, there's nothing in the election code that gives us any direction on verification of that. So there's two sides to it. Everybody's asking, well, what are you doing to verify that they really are disabled, or that they're not, that they don't have a disability? And the law not only doesn't give us direction, it doesn't allow us to do that. We just take the application. It's on the voters' responsibility to decide whether or not and how they mark that application.
Sure. I mean, I can't imagine the extra work it would take to verify everybody who says.
There's just no way to do that. So there was some legislation a couple sessions ago that was trying to get something passed on a verification of that, and I think it died in committee just because it was the amount of work that adds to an election administrator. I mean, we're not doctors, and then there was a concern over the HIPAA violations, and so it didn't even make it out of the elections committee. So we'll see if that something like that were to come back again, but we've always processed those applications according to the Texas election code, and that's what we'll continue to do. So that hasn't changed.
Okay, and once again, we're speaking with Lisa Wise, who's the election administrator for El Paso County. And Lisa, give folks some information. Where can they go if they want to find out more about voting by mail, locations, et cetera? Where can they specifically go, online and by phone?
Yeah, so we try to drive people to our website, which is www.epcountyvotes.com. There's so much information up there. There's the vote by mail information, as well as applications to vote by mail. There's the information on what we have done as a county to promote Vote Safe El Paso, which is what we're working on keeping our location safe. And I encourage people before they go to the polls to check that site. There's so many things you can do, honestly, to keep your time in the polling site as limited as possible. You can make sure, one, you're registered. You can check whether you where your polling site is. We did have to change a few locations, like I said, because of the pandemic. And you can even view your precinct-specific sample ballot. So you can view that. You can even mark it and print it out and take that with you to the polling site.
Oh, tremendous.
So that you can get you can have it kind of pre-filled. You'll go in and just basically you would copy it onto your ballot. So in this election with such few races, that may not save you a ton of time, but it's something you can do ahead of time. And in November, I definitely recommend people do that, as, like I said, with the removal of the straight ticket and then the long ballot. Those are all things you can do ahead of time from your house, so that you're not exposing yourself, to anyone who may have either the COVID-19 or making sure that you're not spending too much time, not having to spend too much time in the polling site. So we recommend people do that. If you don't have access to the website, you can always call our office, which is 915-546-2154, and we're happy to help you get whatever information you need. And we can either walk you through the website if you want to use that in the future, or we can just look up, what races are on your ballot or where you're registered, and if you're registered, and get any information we can for you.
That is tremendous. Speaking with Lisa Wise, the elections administrator for El Paso County. Again, epcountyvotes.com. And I think that printing out a ballot and just you can go through, you can research. You don't have to put the pressure on yourself when you go to a polling station. Hey, what do I think about this or that? You can do your research beforehand. And I think the removal of the straight ticket is honestly probably a good thing. And it's going to force people to maybe look into who is who, what is what issues they need to decide on, and maybe do a little research from your local newspaper, local news sources, El Paso Times, ElPasoMatters.org. I know it does a great voter's guide. Just it pays to research, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, that's what I try to explain to people, is there's so much you can do ahead of time. I mean, there really is. And we try to make that as easy as possible, so that voters can make sure that, again, they're not spending more time than they need to. I know that, it can take a long time, especially with a long ballot in November. So make it as simple as possible.
Outstanding. And let me ask you specifically about your volunteers. You mentioned that, and you go to a polling station and you realize most of the folks there who are volunteering their time are older people. How have you had to, I guess, just in terms of dealing with the different the criteria that come down because of COVID-19, do you have to have more people per polling station, following folks around to clean up? I mean, what are your needs? And if somebody wants to volunteer for this November, can they still do that?
Right. So basically, because this election does see such a low turnout, we're pretty comfortable that the parties, the other thing is that the parties on the primary and primary runoff, the parties, because it's a party event, they nominate the poll workers. They appoint the poll workers. Okay. They recruit the poll workers. So, and they've assured me that they've got enough people to keep the polling place open and moving. And, I'm pretty confident in that. Once we get to November, we will need a lot more people. I mean, that will be when we're really needing people. And they can either call the parties if they have a party that they're aligned with, because again, we have to use the list that the party suggests.
Okay.
But we also do have things in-house that we can do. So if somebody wants to help with entering, data entry, if they want to do help us with the ballot by mail process, if they're interested in serving as, we call them rovers, that go out and have 3 or 4 locations on their route and do troubleshooting. I mean, there's a ton of different ways you can participate in the election if you're interested, and you can start by calling us. And if you do want to work specifically with a party, then we would direct you to that party, or you can work in-house with us on some things that we do that we're allowed to hire for.
Outstanding. And I guess the same phone number applies then, correct? 915-546-2154?
Yep, just call us and we'll figure out a place to put you, because we will definitely be needing people for November.
That is, honestly, it is, I think, in no uncertain terms, one of the most important elections of anybody's lifetime, and for lots of different reasons. And this also involves some of the local things that you might not necessarily know about or feel like you need to research, and then you walk in and get presented with a bill for, as you say, water utilities or something in your school district. It pays to be informed about what you've got, and I think that printout of what's going to be on your specific ballot, depending on where you live, is very important. epcountyvotes.com. It just pays to be informed.
I agree, and they say information is power. That's the truth. You want to have as much as you can.
Absolutely. Speaking with Lisa Wise, the election administrator for El Paso County, once again, polling places are as safe as they possibly can be for voting day, which is this Tuesday, once again from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and you can go to epcountyvotes.com to find out specifically where you need to go. Lisa, we appreciate you spending so much time with us, and I know in the middle of something very busy, the final day of early voting is when we're taping this. You got a lot going on, so we thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it, and please let voters know to reach out anytime, and we'll be happy to help.
And there you heard it. Knowledge is power. We want to thank Lisa Wise, all of the folks with the El Paso County Elections Department, and especially those wonderful volunteers for spending their time to ensure that our rights, our privilege, our responsibility to participate in our democracy is as safe as it possibly can be. Until next week, I'm Duke Keith. This is El Paso Townsquare. So long, everybody.